Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you out there. Osio, Dakwadoa, Amanita, Edoda, Ani Yawiya, Ani Gilohi, Imashali, Israeli. Hello, my name is Amanita. My father is from the Aniyawiya tribe, a long-haired clan, and my mother is Israeli. It's an honor for me to be here and participate in this international conference on spirituality and psychology. I really appreciate Tomorrow's People organization for inviting me here today. I want to today talk on sweat lodge as a potential adjunct to counseling. I appreciate all of you tuning in and interest in this topic today. All right. The purpose is to generally understand what a sweat lodge ceremony is, for those of you who may not be familiar, understand how it could be appropriate for some individuals and cultures and may not be appropriate for others, raise some awareness on how it could be a multiculturally competent practice, how it can be used as an adjunct to some of the more contemporary counseling practices. And then understand some of the contraindicators, indications when it may not be appropriate. Improve the quality of counseling received by indigenous clients. This is quite important because it's been found that indigenous clients, Native American clients, and others tend to drop out of counseling after the first session by approximately 50%, and other individuals of color that happens too. And that's not to say that these individuals are cured after one session, but it's because they're not finding culturally appropriate and understanding counselors at times. So counselors really need to be prepared to provide culturally responsive, multiculturally competent types of services. This is not just seen as appropriate and standard practice at this time, but also as ethically necessary. We need to redefine, we need to adapt theories to provide multiculturally appropriate services. In the context of this conference and all good practice now, in terms of mental health practices, it's important to consider the holistic bio-psycho-sociocultural-spiritual approach to mental health counseling, right? It's not enough to just see the person in front of you, but you have to understand the entire context that they're coming to you in front of you, including all aspects of historical trauma, exploitation, colonization, et cetera, for all individuals. All right. In terms of what a sweat lodge ceremony is, this is a nice image here. You kind of see the lodge there in the back, and that's usually made with saplings and covered with hides or blankets, as you see there. And then the first thing we would do is we would make a large fire for several hours and put what we call the grandfather stones, rocks like you see kind of around the circle. We put rocks there in the fire and make them red hot. And then everybody would kind of file in and sit in a circle in the lodge. There's a hole dug in the center to put the grandfather stones in. We'll close the flap, and then much like a steam room, an herbal steam room, we'll burn herbs and pour water on the rocks, and it becomes a sacred ceremonial practice. Now, many indigenous cultures around the world have traditionally used some form of sweat lodge, sauna, etc., for many, many centuries. As vast, diverse countries, cultures like Scotland, Ireland, Sweden, Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and certainly parts of Latin America and North America. Naturally, the actual practices will vary by culture. Now, it is seen as a sacred spiritual ceremony. It's not just about the physical aspect, but also the spiritual aspect. And again, it is a sacred ceremony, so it's not something to be taken for fun or for just to check out, but rather something very, very sacred. And it's been passed down through practice. In terms of the indigenous way, it's a way, a ceremony to pray, to sing, to connect with the Great Spirit, the Creator, what some folks may consider to be God, cleanse, rejuvenate, and rebirth. So you can see it can be a very, very healing type of ceremony throughout the aspect there. There have been quite a number of benefits from sweat lodge ceremony, and certainly even just something non-spiritual like a sauna or a steam room, right? It's been associated with both physical and spiritual healing, and then improved immunity. In an age of COVID these days, we're all interested in improved immune response, and there are some physiological types of research, scientific research studies that have shown this. It is fairly well established that even the modern secular non-spiritual practice of using a sauna or a steam room does have physical health benefits. So that's a given at this time. But beyond that, there is potential for spiritual, psychological, and emotional healing. And that's where I think the mental health profession can benefit by looking at how we can integrate this and use it as an adjunct, which I'll get to in a few minutes. Other benefits, right? And certainly, again, relevant for the counseling mental health field. There have been recent promising empirical studies, right, showing many positive benefits of sweat lodge. Things like improved moral and cognitive development, reduction in crime, reduction in anger, reduction in violence. All of these can be positive indicators, obviously, right? Improvements in interpersonal relationships, boosted self-esteem. These are things, again, are things that us as mental health professionals are concerned with. Certainly the physical health benefit is there, but beyond the physical health benefit, much like we always talk about this holistic approach, we can't consider physical health without mental health and mental health without physical health, as you all already know, right? So the mental health has been shown to studies looking at anxiety, depression, looking at PTSD, and more. One of the neat things is there are some studies out there that talk about the similarities, the parallels between group counseling, right? Get together, have that positive regard, everybody accepting, people get to share, those types of things, group cohesion, etc. Universality, all of these types of things can happen during a sweat lodge ceremony. Sweat lodge has also been shown beneficial for those with addictive behaviors. In fact, many practices over here in America, they do that for people that are struggling with alcoholism, other drugs, and other addictive behaviors. In medical, some sweat lodges are held at medical hospitals and those types of things, and rehabs, etc. Certainly for those individuals of indigenous or Native American descent, it's a way to decolonize, right? Helping reconnect to indigenous roots, reconnect to those indigenous values, exploring one's cultural identity, exploring one's spirituality, reconnecting and enhancing those things. And through this process, an individual restores their balance, their harmony, which are seen as important for indigenous happiness. So now my main point, and myself and others have researched this and people have done this, is using sweat lodge ceremony as an adjunct to the more contemporary counseling treatment. And it seems to be appropriate for some individuals. And it seems to benefit those, the studies that have been done on this. This is, again, another way of decolonizing psychology, decolonizing counseling. So much of our counseling and our psychology comes from a very westernized type of top-down approach. And this is a way to involve individuals, involve their values, enhance their resiliency, and kind of decolonize and bring in, again, that more multiculturally appropriate type of service. It may be appropriate for some individuals using this type of integrative approach. Certainly some Native American or indigenous people, not all, but some would be appropriate, kind of working on an individual basis and deciding who would be appropriate for this or not. It also may be appropriate for some non-indigenous folks, those that are kind of respectful of sacred practices, those that are invited in and open to this type of spiritual healing. It has been seen, and I believe that Sweat Lodge can really contribute to what we would call communal resiliency factors, particularly for indigenous people, but all people can benefit from communal resiliency, right? We are communal social individuals, social people. So having this, what we would call communal mastery, this is that belief that individual successes are due to social attachments. And it offers cultural hope for the future and involvement in traditional activities and beliefs. This can be very, very helpful for advancing an individual spiritually and just generally mental health wise. It enhances one's ethnic pride, improves and increases spirituality involvement in beliefs. And then it offers social support, which we all know is important for physical and mental health. Now, there are some contraindicators. There are some individuals that this would not be appropriate for. Certainly those that just come on their own without an invitation. Generally, if it's a more traditional practice, somebody should be invited. Somebody else that's part of the community, that's part of the spiritual practice, will be kind of responsible for you and invite you, and that is kind of the appropriate way. We certainly wouldn't want those that come in and disrespect the practices, make fun of it, or deface it, and those types of things. That's somewhat related to the idea of cultural appropriation, right? We don't want people coming in and appropriating the culture in inappropriate ways. Another thing that sometimes happens are people are interested in it for recreation, right? For coming for drugs or for fun or for the kind of experience. And others might want to do it as a strength test. How hot can I get, right? Endurance, how long can I stand? And that's not about this. It's actually about decreasing one's ego rather than boosting one's ego in this case. And those that have major medical concerns, we would want to warn to maybe check with a medical professional before engaging in this type of very, very hot scenario. In terms of referrals to the traditional sweat lodges and traditional healers, we would want to first build relationships with the sweat leaders, right? We don't want to just simply refer and tell people, hey, go and do this, without knowing that these folks would be appropriate, without knowing that they would be welcome there. Next, you would explore the client's interest and see if this is even a fit for them. Related to fit would be assessing their acculturation, assimilation, and their interest, and how much spiritual practices they've done in the past, how much they're interested in wanting to do that. Not all indigenous people and not all non-indigenous people would be interested in this. If it does seem to be appropriate and they show an interest, you might suggest it. And generally in counseling, we don't tell folks what to do, but we just make suggestions. And then if there is a buy-in with the client's permission, generally it's nicer to have kind of a warm in-person introduction, right? And that's great, because soon I'll talk about how that collaboration, how building that relationship, and it's not just about handing them off to the traditional healer, but working together to help this individual, right? We would only refer to traditional sweat lodge leaders with appropriate qualifications, people that have this training and permission from the elders and those kinds of things to be able to do that. If we have non-indigenous leaders, we have folks that are not qualified to do this in the spiritual and the sacred way, then the suggestion is to use maybe a sauna or a steam room rather than the traditional ceremonial practices. People can still hold kind of a group therapy type of session in a steam room without necessarily involving the spiritual and sacred practice, and just use it more as another way of healing. And again, that would not be inappropriate, because you're not appropriating the culture in ways that you don't have permission to do. In terms of collaborating, this is what I'm saying. We don't just hand them off, but we try to make this an integrated approach and collaborate with the traditional healers. Before doing that, we need to have raise our own awareness and our own knowledge and our own skills, right? We want to know about these things, have our self-awareness. Skills like cultural humility are important. So then both the conventional counseling and then the traditional spiritual practices can go hand in hand. They can both be included on the treatment plan. If you have the appropriate permission, the release of information from your client, you can talk with the healers. The healers become part of the treatment team, working together, right? Feedback. This is what's happening in counseling. This is what's happening at the Sweat Lodge. How can we best team up and collaborate with our client, of course, to make this work and to heal that person's concerns that they come into treatment for. Some implications for mental health practitioners. As I've emphasized earlier, we need to provide multiculturally competent services. And this is one way of doing that, of integrating the traditional practices like Sweat Lodge. This is usually seen as more effective for indigenous people than just using the contemporary type of counseling. So this seems to be an appropriate way to do that. We want to consider ethics. There's multiple things. We don't have time to get into all of them, but some things like awareness of potential multiple roles, right? You as a mental health professional are going to be involved in the community. You want to be cautious of developing those multiple roles with your clients and with others. We want to be cautious about not sharing confidential information that your client may have told you in session with others outside of the community when you're running into them. There's also small world phenomenon, right? If you're involved in that community also. We want to have caution about recommending it to inappropriate individuals, those who are not open to it, those who are going to disrespect the practices. And then we also want to be very, very cautious about not facilitating cultural appropriation, not furthering exploitation, not furthering colonization. So these are all sticky topics that need to be navigated carefully. Some other recommendations briefly here is we want to integrate that multicultural and traditional healing with the modern counseling, right? So that they go again hand in hand. In this way, we're maintaining that ethical mandate to provide culturally appropriate services. We also want to include the cultural and community resiliency factors that we talked about, right? It's not just about what's going wrong with folks, but what are some of their strengths? What are their cultural strengths? What are their spiritual strengths that can help them through this? We'll engage in that cultural humility, not kind of top down and saying, this is what I think is best for you. This is my expertise, but really being humble when we approach somebody from their cultural background. And we know that community involvement, both on the part of the mental health professional and certainly on the part of our client, that is very important to heal and transcend trauma. And that, of course, is one of our goals, is to help our clients heal and transcend that trauma. Now, lastly here, I want to wrap up kind of sharing with you all a short vignette of an individual who participated in contemporary counseling and then was referred to a traditional healer and went to Sweat Lodge, and this benefited him. Colorado is a Ute Native American man of 20 years old. He recently started university and was referred to the university counseling services for drinking, fighting, and suicidal plans. Now, an assessment showed that he grew up quite involved in the traditional spiritual practices and felt a lot of ethnic pride, but he was drifting away from those since a recent breakup and being in the university. Now, part of the treatment included connecting him to a traditional medicine man who could collaborate with the counselor in order to improve his well-being. This included Sweat Lodge ceremonies, and beyond the Sweat Lodge ceremonies, other things like community talking circles, speaking with community elders, both in the Sweat Lodge and outside. Through the Sweat Lodge, he was connected to these elders, and then seeking and providing support to his family. Individual counseling was client-centered, focused on relevant life domains such as his acculturation and spirituality levels, his self-concept, and personal values. And all of this benefited him in the long run. Now, just to finish up, we'll just talk about a few future research. We need empirical studies to better demonstrate the benefits of Sweat Lodge and using it as an adjunct to counseling. We want to do quantitative, qualitative, longitudinal studies, and we want to do community-based participatory action research that is non-exploitative and benefits the community and has the community involvement. Wado, thank you very much. Very nice having you all, and thank you for your attention. And